We're going to finish the KDX 200 in this video. No excuses, this has gone on long enough. I'm excited to think that we're so close to the finish line here, but also nervous because there's a lot of stuff that I haven't figured out yet. I'm not sure what's going to happen between now and the end of the video. You ready to find out?
I'm excited.
The last thing we did here was create a path for this speedometer cable through the top clamp, and now I need to make some brackets to hold the gauge cluster in place. I'll make them out of these pieces of aluminum. They're 6.5 inches long and 1 3/4 inches wide. I think I'll attach them right here and bend them in a way that they'll catch this hole right here. I've made this long because not only does this need to hold the gauges in place, but I also want it to extend outward to hold the headlight shroud where it goes. Originally there was some hardware that extended from the bar clamps up to these two holes, but now there's some gauges in the way and I don't want this thing flopping around, so my best hope is that these pieces can serve two purposes all at the same time. You want to see me bring around the bench vise?
Bring it around.
When you pull up with one of these, they know you mean business.
Do you?
You're either a man of utility or you're not. First thing I want to do is use the hacksaw and trim this into a speedometer bracket shape.
Kind of wobbly.
It's a fine bench.
Oh, that's a horrible sound.
I can't even hear it. I mean, it sounds dull to me. I guess I'm kind of desensitized to shrill, high-pitched, irritating sounds. Alright, I finished cutting out 2 of these pieces, 1 for each side. Before I make this bend, I want to anneal the aluminum, which means heating it up to about 650 degrees. That makes the molecules in there relax a little bit and it's easier to bend. A Sharpie gets light at just about that exact temperature. So I'll heat this up with the torch until the marker disappears, then make my bend.
You can make a marker disappear?
Yeah. Funny pants. I want to heat this up just until the stripes start to fade away. If I go too hot and the metal turns into a puddle, that's too much. Okay, that should do it. Time to bend. I enjoy creating custom parts, but there's some difficulty when it comes to making 2 that match.
Oh, stop complaining. They look the same.
I got lucky here, so we're gonna keep going. The next thing I need to do is mark and drill some holes so I can fasten the gauges to my new brackets and the brackets to the motorcycle. I'm trying to line up where these last couple of holes need to be drilled. This looks intimidating.
No, it doesn't.
Okay, we won't use that one. This is entertainment. I thought it looked intimidating. This is an Allen wrench. It has a point at one end. I'm using it to go in through the back of this clamp to create reference marks on the plates.
You find that intimidating too?
I think it's interesting. I think it's helpful for somebody. Do you want to switch places?
I could definitely poke your Allen wrench through a hole without feeling intimidated.
Why don't you ever say anything constructive?
I do. Like, don't drill a hole through the triple clamp.
Cut it! I've got the gauges mounted up to the motorcycle. I think it's an important moment. Next thing I want to do is put the headlight in front of it. I want the back of this to fit as close to right here as possible, so I'm going to cut off these mounting tabs because they're in the way. Alright, that should do the trick. Last things to do here are bend these over, drill some holes, and bolt it all together.
Okay.
Why don't you ask me about the charges, Council?
I'm like so confused.
Ask me about the charges.
What are the charges?
2 counts!
Oh dear.
Open and shut case, bracketeering. These turned out. I'm sorry. Really sorry about that. Can you give me a light sentence? BAM! How's that?
Well, good job, but it looks horrible.
What, these? You don't like these?
It had enough holes already. You added 2 more?
I think it gives it personality.
That's not what it gives it.
It's not a pan. Nice pan to the pan, fam.
Oh no.
But it'll work. Next thing to do is put on an ignition switch. I wasn't going to mess around with an ignition switch because it's just more complication, but since I had to install a battery and the only control I have over the headlights is a high beam and low beam switch, if this is connected, we're shining brightly up here. This is the cheapest ignition switch I could find. It's from a four-wheeler, but we're still keeping with the theme. It says Kawasaki.
Wow, you stink. I can smell you from over here.
We'll edit that out. I'll mount it right here underneath the gauges. I'll make a bracket for it out of some more of this 1/8 inch aluminum plate. I sure love spending time out here with you.
I like spending time with you too.
Every time I send a joke your way or make a smart remark, terrible pun, what I'm really saying is I love you.
I love you too. And your videos are not nearly as bad as they used to be.
Trying to be sentimental.
You've come a long way.
I'm trying to be sentimental here. I was feeling pretty confident in that last clip. Oh yeah, I'll just whip out an ignition switch bracket. But when I was about 70% done with the part, I realized two mistakes. This bend is too far forward, which means that when this is installed, it pushes the gauge cluster too far forward and makes the headlight do a nosedive. The other trouble is that I just assumed that this cutout for the ignition switch lined up with the center of this clamp. I didn't realize that this gauge is bigger than this gauge, and this cutout is stepped over 3/16 of an inch. I tried to kink it over this way, and I could probably bend it into a shape that would work, but this is something I want to be proud of. I don't want to run something like that. So I took another crack at it today. You want to see what I came up with?
Yes. Ooh.
Version 2. The bend is tucked up closer to the mounting points, and I've offset this portion of the plate so that it lines up with the cutout on the gauge cluster. The key switch should fit in here just like this. And watch this. How's that?
Ooh, that's nice.
Listen. That's a good sound. This is not just a means of making electrical connections in this switch. This is the key to fun and adventure. Maybe injury too. Next thing to do is connect some of these wires. I need to attach these two to the engine stop circuit, which conveniently is this wire, so I'll splice in and add a couple connections. This will let me turn the engine off with either the key switch or the button. And for the other ignition wires, brown plugs into this red and goes down to the battery, and white feeds into the main wiring so that whenever the key is on, everything gets power. Now I need to do something about this. A lot of wires in here. Goes up to the gauge cluster.
Problem solved.
One downfall of modifying the wiring as much as I have is that at this point, the colors are almost meaningless. I've already forgotten where a lot of these go. I pity the poor soul who might work on this in the future.
So if he's colorblind, no disadvantage?
No disadvantage. You want to see if it works?
Yes.
One shot at this. First thing we're looking for is backlights on the gauges.
Ooh.
Okay.
Ooh.
Signs of life. High beam is on, and high beam is on here. If we go to low beams, this should go off. One more test. The turn signal indicators. Ready?
Yes.
Left. And right side. All right. I don't have a neutral indicator circuit or a water temperature gauge, so we can take care of those right now. The next thing to work on, and this is the last looming issue on the motorcycle. After this, it's all downhill, smooth sailing. The tachometer. I started messing around with this a couple of months ago, but then I realized that the engine ran like garbage, so it got put on the back burner. But now we need to go head to head. We need to figure out what's going on. The problem is that it indicates a faster speed than the engine is actually turning. The first thing I want to do is see exactly what the discrepancy is. So I'll put the gas tank back on and then use my digital tachometer to compare the actual engine RPM with what's indicated right here. My best guess is that this is going to say double. Let's see. 27 there, and 55, 56 up here. So about double or a little bit more. Valuable data. So what do we do with it? On the back of the tachometer, there's 3 wires. 12 volt positive, 12 volts negative, and the signal wire from the ignition coil. I can't do anything with the signal wire. I can't do anything with the ground. But what if I reduce the voltage coming to the tachometer? Maybe that will reduce where the needle is at a given RPM.
How are you going to do that?
I'll try to use this thing. It's a voltage regulator. Whatever the input voltage is, it will reduce it down to 8 volts. I chose 8 volts because I only have 2 on hand. 8 volts and 10 volts. And I think 10 volts would be too close to 12 volts.
It would be better if you had 6 volts. But
What?
nothing.
Better if I had 6 volts. I think so too. Half, double. I'll work with what I have. Maybe it's a logarithmic decreasation, so it needs 8 volts. 7.9 volts.
Should be good.
25.
It's still double.
Still double. I've got to open this thing up, don't I?
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't know, camera girl. We're digging into the great unknown. So that's down. It's okay, the Corvette caught its fall. And here's the little bugger. Oh. That's some real hocus pocus. I think there's a distinct possibility here that whoever programmed my reality didn't actually create a logical explanation for how this works, because it would just be extra disk space that would never be used. Why waste resources? I'm never going to mess with it. So this is witchcraft, plain and simple. But I've noticed 2 things. Number 1, an adjustment. I always know an adjustment when I see one. And number 2, after it's all said and done here, it just outputs to 2 wires, positive and negative. In the end, after it takes a long way around, this is just a voltmeter. What I'm going to try to do here is start the engine and set it to a high idle. Then start turning that adjustment screw back here and see if it changes where the needle goes. Worth a try?
Yes.
That's close. I should just leave well enough alone, shouldn't I?
Yeah, so let's move on to the next part.
These are resistors. They resist electricity somehow. If I wire these in a certain way, which I've already forgotten because I don't know anything about this, but I'll go look at the paperwork. If I put 2 resistors here at the final output to the gauge, it should reduce the voltage and change the needle position. Don't pay attention to my hand gestures right now because this is a voiceover. It took me a while to figure this out, and I still don't understand why it works. But we'll cut back to the video, see if anything happens when I have resistors wired to the tachometer.
I wish you'd cut your hair instead of cutting to that. I'm feeling sassy.
So my suspicion is that if I get the right combination here, I can peg that RPM gauge right where I want it. I'll solder in a resistor right here on the positive side, and then I'll take some various different ones and bridge them here between these 2 wires and see if it moves the needle. I've got a 47 ohm resistor soldered in here. The first thing I'm going to try with it is a 2000 ohm. So I'll start up the engine with just the single resistor and watch for any fluctuation in the gauge when I touch the second resistor to the wires. I don't see any change at all. Let's try something else. This was 2000.
What's that one?
220.
Ooh!
I got a whole box of this stuff.
Oh my!
Ready?
Yes! Woo!
No question, that takes it down. Indicated is about 52. About 35 actual. I need a little bit lower than 220. I don't care if it's exact, because remember, if I back the screw off all the way, it's almost where it needs to be anyway. I'll try another 47. I think it was 47. Maybe it was 45. The exact same one as is in here, right here. I think it'll work. What's the actual? 3500 actual. Drops it right down underneath. That works. Finally! Time to solder both resistors to the gauge. Permanently. 3 days on a tachometer. So what we'll do here is I'll start the motor, and then Jennifer will look at the RPMs with the zapper, and I'll target a 5,000 RPM engine speed. Once that's done, I'll start adjusting the dial to make it match as she calls out the second-by-second updates on the engine fluctuations, because it won't hold a steady 5,000 RPM. This is a rough and raggedy two-stroke. I'll let you call it.
It's a little smoky in here.
I'm at the tachometer.
I think it's good.
It works. I think that we're done here. Don't clean gauge faces with alcohol. Just a quick little swipe, trying to clean the dust off before reassembling this, and completely took the paint off of number 11. Oh well. Come here, camera girl. Watch this. I think that looks pretty good.
Yeah, except for number 11, which looks terrible.
I could use it like this, but for certain things, especially when I'm so invested in a project, excellence is the only option. So I ordered a new gauge cluster that will be coming in the mail in a few days. Probably a waste of money.
Oh, it's certainly a waste of money.
Next thing to do, and the very last electrical job, is a horn. I'm feeling thrifty because of what happened with the gauges, so instead of buying a horn, I'm going to use something that's on hand. Actually, it's almost on hand. You want to go on an outing?
Okay, are we taking the Dodge?
Yeah.
It must be a pretty big horn.
I'm not only doing this because it's cheaper. I'm also doing it because I think it might be interesting. I could buy a horn on the internet for $5 and have it delivered to my house. You know what I'm up to?
I don't know.
This is a Chevrolet Cavalier car. The engine's blown up. License and registration are expired. It's a worthless car. I don't know how I'm going to get rid of it. But there should be a horn in here. There it is, right behind the bumper. How do we get to it? They don't make them like they used to. Got it. Back to the shop. First test of the Cavalier horn. I'm curious if this is any good, but I also wonder if this battery has enough power to make it go. Let's find out.
You scared me.
That'll work. So I'm thinking the best place for this horn is right here next to the radiator. I want it to be facing forward and out in the open as much as possible, but still kind of discreet for maximum blastage. This calls for a bracket, just like that. Camera girl, you've been an advocate for the horn from the start. You want to do the honors?
Oh, okay.
Easy there, Roadhog. Do you think it's too blatant up here?
I like it. It's just all hanging out.
Okay. If you approve, we'll go with it.
Sounds good.
The electrical work is done. Everything works. The next thing I want to do is take care of this oily mess. The engine runs really good right now, but for a long time it was way too rich. A lot of gas and oil has accumulated in this muffler and saturated whatever media is inside of here. I could take it apart and clean it, but ever since I got this other KDX, I've had my eye on the muffler. This is an aftermarket Answer brand spark arrestor. I really like the look. I'm going to swipe it off of here. Put it on the other one. There it is. Nice piece. What?
I don't know what the future is for Jen's bike.
I want to get your opinion on something. Here's how the muffler is supposed to be installed on a motorcycle. About right there. What do you guys think about kicking it up a notch? Like that. Flat or a little bit of attitude?
Attitude.
And you?
I like the attitude.
We go with the attitude. I'm familiar with taking parts that weren't meant for a motorcycle and making them fit. I don't know about taking parts that already fit and then modifying them to fit differently. Sometimes you need to be bold. I'm gonna call it not a waste of time.
It looks better.
I think it goes much better with the lines of the motorcycle. Sound check. I really want to ride this motorcycle. It's been building as we've been getting closer to finally being finished, but I want to ride this motorcycle. There's one more thing I have to do. Possibly two things. I was thinking about building a bracket for this flasher module, but I thought it would be betraying my roots if I didn't have at least one important component held in place by a zip tie. So I think I'll leave that where it is. What I want to build is something to keep the front brake line away from the ignition switch. Right now, it's really in the way of the key. I've still got some of this plate aluminum. I'll see if I can make a front brake line diverter assembly. This part is highly symbolic of the project. The final bit of fabrication is about to go on the motorcycle. There it is. Obstacle-free keying is what we're after. This motorcycle is finished, practically. All I have left to do now is install what's in this box, plastic pieces, and a few extras I picked up along the way. I'm not going to videotape putting this stuff on. Camera girl, you can go inside and I'll do it on my own time. But when you come back out, I'll have it put together and we can do the first grand presentation of the KDX.
That's exciting.
So go!
Oh!
Keep
Wait
going.
a second.
You need to take it apart to put it back together. That's one of those sayings that doesn't make any sense. You need to spend money to make money. Keep going, keep twirling. All right, it's done. Just don't let me get too close to it or I'll think of something else that will take 3 days to do. Here's the things that I removed from the motorcycle. I replaced them mostly with parts from either the first parts bike or poor Jen's bike.
It's kind of sad.
I think it's down for the count. Here's what we began with. Broken down trail bike, no paperwork, poor running condition. You ready to see what we ended up with?
I am. Oh, it's nice.
What do you think?
That looks really good.
1992 KDX 200 street and trail concept. Since you swept the camera away, I mostly just cleaned the motorcycle and bolted on some parts. But I also made these turn signal brackets because the way I had these blinkers on before, they were bolted to the side of the fender, which isn't square with the motorcycle, so it was difficult to get them lined up. I also made a replacement license plate holder that looks more like it was supposed to be here. That's what it replaced. 3/16 inch steel. This is the type of thing that looks like it was made in a place like this. Can't have that. Earlier in the video, somebody mentioned that they didn't like the way these holes looked in the front of the headlight. I was able to buy a replacement headlight enclosure that wasn't cracked down the middle, but when it was time to do the deed and drill the holes in the front, I couldn't do it. Your voice, it was echoing inside my head.
What's a side effect from living with me?
So to make it stop, I drilled these inconspicuous holes in the side and put a metal plate behind them, and now it's all held in place by a couple of spring-and-sprungen. I really appreciate everybody that's been watching these videos. Knowing that there are people who are interested in seeing this get done is what gives me the motivation to finish it. Next video, we're gonna go for a ride. We're gonna take it out on the trail, take it on the street. It's gonna be a lot of fun. It's done.
I don't know what to do. Thanks for watching.